Hello and welcome to this Unity lesson. This is Unity Unit 6 Part 2, GUIs and Menus. We're going to build on what we did in the most recent lesson where we created a menu for our opening scene of our island project using GUI textures. This time we're going to create an interactive menu in a different way using Unity's built-in on-GUI functionality and also work with GUI skins. So let's get to it. First thing you should do is open up your most recent menu scene, the one that you used in part 1 of this lesson. And in order to make use of the on-GUI system for our menu, we first need to disable the existing GUI texture-based menu items. So here's how you can do that. Go into your hierarchy window in your menu scene, and one at a time you're going to select each of the GUI textures that you created for the last scene, except for the title, and we're going to simply turn them off so that you can't see them. So I've selected the instructions button in my hierarchy view, and if I go over to Inspector, I can just come up to the little checkbox right next to the name of the object and click on it. And when I do that, you'll see here in the game view that now my instructions menu button has disappeared. So I'll do the same thing to the play button and the same thing to the quit button. So they still exist in my project, and in fact they exist in my scene, but they are turned off, so they won't be seen and they won't accept any clicks from the user. Now we're going to create a new empty game object, and this is going to be a game object that simply is there in the hierarchy to hold the script that we're going to write to show the new menu GUI. So to create that new game object, go ahead and go up on the menu and click Game Object and create Empty and rename it. We're going to call it Menu 2. Once we've created that empty game object, then we need to create a script to attach to that game object. So in your project window, come down to Create and JavaScript, and name this JavaScript main menu GUI. And once you've named it, then open it up by double-clicking on it in the project view, and that will open it up in Mono Develop. Once you've opened up the main menu GUI script, yours will be almost empty, and I want you to go ahead and paste in the code that is available on the course Blackboard site. It's a rather longer piece of code than what we've used in previous lessons, and I'm going to walk through very briefly what is going on in this script. So we've got a collection of public variables and private variables declared up front, including an audio clip that's going to be played, a beep sound when the user clicks on a menu item. The next one is something that's new for this lesson. We're going to include a GUI skin. This is a collection of pre-built GUI objects and variables that you can include in Unity to show menus and other GUI items. So we need to tell Unity which skin we're going to use for our GUI. Then we're defining a rectangle that's going to be the size and position for our new GUI menu. And then we're declaring another rectangle which is going to be a normalized area. This will allow us to set up our menu GUI for our project in such a way that it will position itself correctly on screen at multiple resolutions. So one way to set the position of the items in a menu is to hard code in X and Y coordinates on the screen for each of those objects, which works okay if you know in advance what your dimensions are going to be for your project. But if you don't, or if you allow the user to change those dimensions when they run the application, then you can run into trouble. And so using this normalized rectangle and some code to go with it will help avoid that problem. Then we've got some rectangles for the various buttons that will show in the menu. Again, this will define the size of each of those buttons and the position of those buttons within that normalized menu area. And then we've got this odd private variable called menu page, and it's a string that we're assigning the name main. We'll be using this menu page variable to let Unity know whether the GUI to be shown at a given moment is the menu GUI or a separate GUI we're going to create for instructions. And so that's what this variable is set for. Then moving down to our start function, what we're doing here is the code that will allow the GUI to appear in appropriate location on the screen even as the dimensions of the screen change. So that's what's happening all here. You can see we've got some code that's setting a rectangle based on the width of the screen minus the area of that menu itself, and then we do some multiplication to set things up just right. Next, and this is a key piece for this lesson, is the onGUI function. This is a built-in function in Unity that allows you to very quickly create GUIs for different uses inside your application. So I'll have you look through that yourself, but very briefly, the way onGUI works is that you define a GUI area, a window, and then you define the buttons that should appear within that GUI, and then you describe what should happen when a user clicks on any of those buttons within the GUI. So here we've described what skin we're going to use, and that's I talked about a minute ago. We're going to create a GUI skin that will describe the overall look and feel of our GUI. And then we're creating a group. This is going to be a collection of GUI items to show on the screen, including a play button. That's what we've got right here, and an instructions button and a quit button. Each of which has its own set of actions associated with it. And that's sort of the key pieces within this main menu GUI script. You of course want to spend more time looking through it to make sure you understand all the pieces that are in it, and in the chapter in our Unity book the author goes into sort of great detail and builds up this script piece by piece so that you can understand what's taking place in it. But in our case, for this short tutorial, we're just going to paste all this into the script and then make sure we've saved it and enter back into our menu scene. And now we need to apply that main menu GUI script to the menu 2 empty game object in our hierarchy. So just drag it over and drop it on there. So we've got the script attached now to that menu 2 item, and if you look over in the inspector you'll see there's quite a collection of variables that need to be set. A key one is this menu skin variable that's looking for a GUI skin. Now we haven't yet to create a GUI skin, so let's go ahead and do that now. So in order to create a GUI skin, you go to your project window, to the Create drop-down menu, and down the very bottom, you may not see it in the recording here, but it's the very bottom item in the drop-down menu. There's an item called GUI Skin. When you create that, it will create a default name for your GUI skin, and you'll want to rename the GUI skin that's created Main Menu, which is I've already done here. Now we've got our main menu, GUI Skin, and if you select it in the project window and look over in the inspector, you'll see that there's a giant collection of variables associated with that GUI skin. The first of which is font. Now Unity defaults to including an Arial font with the editor, and for this lesson you can go ahead and just leave the default font, that Arial font. When you're working on this on your own and you're playing around with it, I invite you to try out different fonts. You'll need to import them into Unity to test them out. For example, I've included I imported a Franklin Gothic medium font that I had on my Mac. I just brought it right into Unity by finding it on my Mac desktop in the fonts folder and then just dragging it into my project file, and there it is. So play around and try out different fonts with your GUI skin by setting this first variable here. For this lesson, we'll stick with the default one, but we are going to make some other changes. Specifically, we're going to make some changes to the button variable. If you expand out that button variable, you'll notice that the very first section in the button variable are different states: a normal state for the button, a hover state, an active, a focused, and so on. What I want to do is expand out the normal, hover, and active states. And you'll note that in my example here, where it says background, I've already applied some textures that are going to appear in the background of those buttons. What we need to do next in your project is set up these textures so that they will work as background textures for the button on the main menu GUI skin. So let's go ahead and do that next. In your project window, expand out the Book Assets folder and go down to the Textures subfolder, and then scroll down until you find 3 textures that begin with the word GUI. We've got GUI button active, GUI button hover, and GUI button normal. What we need to do to set up those buttons to work properly is similar to what we did in the last lesson. We just need to change the texture type. In your project, it's likely that the texture type in the inspector will be defaulting to texture. Because we're going to use it as GUI, we're going to change that texture type to GUI and then hit apply. So one by one, I want you to select each of those 3 GUI textures and then come over into the inspector and change their type to GUI and then hit apply. So in my case, I've already done that. And that's all really that you need to do to set up those textures to now work properly with the GUI skin. So let's return back to that GUI skin object inside the project window. It's called main menu. And then come over again to the inspector. Make sure that you've expanded out the button section within the inspector, and then expand out the normal, hover, and active sections of the button. And then what you can do is over in your project view, we're now going to drag over the appropriate textures to each of these states to the background variable. So for the button normal background, we're going to use the GUI button normal. So in your project window, click, drag, and drop it onto that slot. And then do the same for the hover texture and for the normal, for the active texture. One more change to make to the button section in the main menu GUI skin is we're going to change the text color that will appear on the button for each of the states. Now the way this works is when the button is just sitting there in its normal state, we'll have one color of text, which in this case we're going to make white. And so if yours is not white, you can simply click on that color box and then choose a color that's white or nearly white. And for the hover, we're going to make a different color, sort of a dark color to go well with the texture that's going to appear. In my case, I used kind of a purple color. You're welcome to use whatever color you like. And one more of the active, when we actually press and click that button, we're going to give it a red color. Alright, we've got most of the settings we need for our GUI skin. But there is one more that we're going to change. Right now, in your GUI Skin inspector, you'll notice that in your inspector, the font size is likely to be listed as 0. Again, this is the font size within the button section, and this is where we're going to set the size of the font that will appear within the button in our GUI. It defaults to 0, and we're going to make it a little bit bigger. We're going to set it to be 26. Right, so please do that. And then you can close up that button section. Now you'll see obviously that within this GUI skin there are many, many more sections. And you and your team, when you're working on your project, may decide to create your own custom GUI skin. In fact, I encourage you to. And when you do so, I also encourage you to try out some changes to the many different sections within here, because there are plenty of them. But for now, we're just going to mess with the button one at the moment. Okay. So now I've got all those set. Now I'm going to return all the way back over to my Menu 2 game object in the hierarchy view. I'm going to select on that. And now I'm going to come back over to the inspector, and we can begin to set some of these variables on our main menu GUI script. Go ahead and add the beep sound from the book assets folder and the sound child folder. And we'll choose menu beep and drag that over onto the audio clip. And then menu skin, well, that's the GUI skin that we just created a moment ago called main menu. So drag that over and drop it on the menu skin. Then we've got a whole collection of variables for different aspects of our menu GUI. We've got the overall area, the play button, instruction button, quit button, and the instructions themselves. So next, let's go in and set up our buttons and our main menu area. And here's how we're going to set them. For the main menu area X coordinate, we're going to put 0.2. And then for the y is 0.5. These are normalized values that are going to work with the normalized rectangle variable that we set in the script. So it's looking for a number between 0 and 1 in this case. And so we're going to do 0.2 and 0.45 for our x and y. But then the width and height are just in regular, so-called measures, pixel based. So we're going to do 200 for our width, 200 pixels, and our height's going to be 150 pixels. And then we need to set up our play button. Its x and y coordinates are going to be 0, and that's 0 inside that menu area rectangle. So the play button's going to be at the upper left-hand corner of the menu area. And then we need to set the width. We'll make it 200, and we'll make the height 40. Now the instructions button is going to appear below the play button, so the Y needs to reflect that. So it's going to be 50 pixels down, and it's still going to be 200 across, and it's going to be 40 up and down. And then our quit button needs to be yet lower on the screen, so we're going to set the Y to 50, and then 200 again, and 40 again. Now we also have this instructions section. This is going to be some text that appears on the screen when the player clicks on the instructions menu item. We haven't totally set this up yet. It's something that we need to set up inside our main menu GUI skin. But we'll do that next. For now, let's set its position so that it will appear where we'd like it to. We're going to have it be in the upper left-hand corner of our main menu area rectangle, and our width is going to be 200 again, and we'll set the height to 150. So it's actually equal to the size of the main menu area. It will fill up that whole area. Now, in order to have this instructions text look the way we like, let's go back into our GUI Skin and modify one section of that GUI Skin. So come back to your project window, click on the main menu GUI Skin, go over to your inspector, and we're going to expand out the section that's called Label. And in this case, what we're going to do is change the color of the text that appears. You can choose whatever color you like. Again, this is going to be just regular GUI text that appears on the screen when the player clicks the instructions button. So look at your menu shot, the view that the player is going to see in that scene. And look at the color that's in the background beneath the main title, that Survival Island title. In my case, the way I've got my screen set up, it's blue. And so when a player clicks on the instructions text, that text is going to appear against a blue background and some green as well. So I might choose a color that would appear cleanly behind that. Maybe I'll choose sort of a yellow color for my text, and you'll want to test this out. Again, this is under the label, under the normal setting. This is just when the label is appearing on the screen, and in that case my text is going to be yellow. The only other change I want to make is that I want to again change the font size from its default, which was likely to be 0 on yours, to something different, and I'm going to make mine 16 point. And I'll see whether that's a good size or not. It may not be. All right, once I've made all of those changes, now I should be in a good place to test out my scene and see how it all works. In my case, my project, if I go to the build settings, is set up for a standalone. You're welcome to do a standalone or a web player. But I'm following along with what the book did, and it was using a standalone so that the quit button would work. So let's go ahead and test it out. Alright, so let's take a look. So I see here my play button's in a good location. My quit button looks like it's a little high, so I need to go back and check the position that I set for that quit button, because right now it's covering up my instructions. So let's go back over to our menu. And let's come down and take a look and see the problem here is that my quit button here I've set up to be 50, and so I didn't put it low enough. In fact, I put it right in the same location up and down as my instructions button. So I'll change that and we'll test it again. Now you can see that each of the buttons appears where I want it to on the screen. It appears right below this Survival Island title. When I roll over, I get that hover state texture is appearing appropriately, and the color of the text changes to a purple color. And if I click and hold, you'll see it turns sort of a red color for the text, and it switches to that other texture which I want. When I release, then I get the instruction text, and that color works pretty well. That yellow color is pretty visible against that background, and the size is about appropriate. If I click the back button, it takes me back again to the beginning. If I click play, it's going to take me into my main scene of the project, and there's no way out of that, so I take us back out here. And then if I click quit, because we're in the editor, it doesn't actually quit out of the Unity application, but I put in a some helper text using the debug log function so that I can see that were this published out to the desktop, then it would indeed quit out of the application. So that's it for this lesson. Please try it out yourself, and we'll go on from there.